Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transportation. And today, I am very happy to say that our construction cost report is finally out. It was out yesterday. So there are, in the combined report, there are 6 big sections. There are, in the final report, the 5 case studies for Boston. I don't remember the order, but I believe it's Boston, Istanbul, a bunch of Italian cities at once, Stockholm, and New York. And then at the beginning, there's a combined PDF of all of them combined. Sorry, there's not combined PDF. This is the combined PDF. No, at the beginning there is the overview or we sometimes call it synthesis or executive summary, but essentially it is this. And we're probably just going to talk about the overview, not the specific cases. What we just uploaded are the intern overview and the New York case. And I'm going to structure this mostly as a Q&A, and the reason it's a Q&A is I'm not going to just say, I don't want to repeat what we say in the report. There's no real reason to do this. I can vlog it, but there are other people, like for example Reese, like our RM Transit. Okay, maybe RM Transit, this person, not the random StarCraft videos that come when I try to autocomplete YouTube.com. I mean, he is a more experienced vlogger than I am, so I think it's but I'm going to structure it as a Q&A. So we're not really talking about rolling stock in the report, but generally you want to use when you're running intense urban rail, you should use intense urban rail stock, which is something like this, or like what the very urban commuter rail lines like Yamanote and Keihin-Tohoku and Chuo, things like that, run in Tokyo. So Paris has this problem where they have bespoke rolling stock on the RER, and this does drive up costs, which is kind of weird because usually Paris does not have a large cost pyramid, and for rolling stock they do. In general, do not be bespoke, be standardized. You're never as special as you think you are. The most special of special cities, Tokyo, uses remarkably standardized equipment. I don't know how they do infrastructure construction. For subway construction, the answer is they mostly just don't. But their equipment is very standardized. I mean, Japan's standardized, which is different from Europe standardized, but very standard. It's kind of, they define the standard. It's not like they get things that only work there. And so this is the synthesis report. If we do it, if I zoom out here, then you might be able to actually read the entire thing and not have my head intrude over the bottom. So, the meat of this really needs to be thought of as why are things. So it's not this graph. This graph, as we mentioned, has artifacts like how much is tunneled. So the US is technically not the worst in the world in average cost per kilometer. I should not have Mastodon on, except that now I exit and therefore I cannot read Connor's post, so I'll do it later. But relative to the amount of tunneling, the US is the worst. Worse than New Zealand, for example. New Zealand, this is just the Auckland commuter rail tunnel, and the equivalent of that in the United States does not cost only $600 million a kilometer. You wish. It's things that are billions per kilometer. East Side Access, Gateway, things like that. So, to think of what New York does wrong, we have these sets of graphics that kind of explain this, and instead of doing that, I'm going to show you the animated version. the one that is not that I need to. So, okay, let's move my head so that it's not going to go over. Yeah, so this is not in specific units, just the axes just are which things relate to which things. So the point is that the stations are not twice as big as they need to be. I mean, they are, but they're twice as. So the issue is it's both the stations are too big, but also they're deep mined. So 72nd and 86th Street stations on 2nd Avenue subway were deep mined. This has a cost premium. This is in the New York report, which it's going to be toward the end of the report. I don't remember page references anymore, but we can check here. So 72nd and 96th. This is the length, and just for reference, the length should be 180 or 190. It's a little more than twice for 72nd, not much less than twice for 86th, and 96 was even bigger. 96 was cut and cover, so cost per cube. This is in millions, so you should think of it as 3.4 thousand. This is 4.9 thousand, and this is 5.5 thousand. These were substantially more expensive per cubic meter than this, 72nd and 86th relative to 96. These were deep mined. This is a big cut and cover dig, and so overall these stations cost about 3 times, or rather not the cost. The amount of construction on these stations is about 3 times as much as necessary. Because again, this is almost 3 times as big as needed. This is about twice as big as needed, but also using a more expensive mining technique. When you do see this with higher cost per excavated cubic meter here, and it's just a lot of back of the house space. They decided to put it in front and behind the trains instead of above them in the mezzanine, and this is the result. And now the stations are only about 3/4 of the cost, so when that is about a factor of 3 too big, what we're getting is 2.06x. Now standardization, it's kind of a similar calculation. Is you take the share of the project that is the systems and the finishes. And again, we can look in the New York case. It is going to be a table that is going to be farther up. It's this one. So we can compare the cost of civil infrastructure. For example, the tunnel construction is a civil infrastructure. Heavy civils are civil infrastructure. Excavation, same thing. But instead, we can compare this with the contracts for the finishes and for the systems. So this is systems. Here we have various finishes here and here. This is an error. This should be part of 86th Street. It's not a company called 86th Street Constructors that built 72nd Street. It's not, I mean, there are. I mean, occasionally you will find people doing the equivalent of calling your cat dog, but this was not one of these cases. These are not people that have that kind of sense of humor. But anyway, so the point is to compare the finishes with the civils, or the systems here with the civils, and the ratio is that is about 53 or 54% civils to 46 or 47% systems and finishes. This is not the correct number, or rather, it's not the number that it should be. It's the correct number in the sense that it's the number for New York So it's a correct description of New York, but it's not a good number. Let's call it a good number. We can look at good numbers. Italy is the Italian project. Italian report has the most detailed breakdown. The Swedish case is not as detailed on this, but when I've looked at their contracts, I've gotten something similar. So we're going to look at MB1 in Rome, and the reason is that MC is weird, and by weird I mean MC T3 has problems like the stations were unusually expensive. This is 152 million for a station. This is not usually how these cost. San Giovanni, the most expensive otherwise, is 110, and then the rest of the project was 8 stations for 270. This is because the station is called Fori Imperiali. And if you're wondering why, it is because it was literally where the ancient forum was. So very difficult archaeology is needed very difficult work in general is needed to avoid disturbing the ruins. The Italians are very proud of their history. General places that have these ruins are proud of them. They don't need UNESCO to tell them to preserve them. The Italians are very proud of this, the Greeks, the Turks, the Israelis. So MB1 is probably a better case, and this is the cost of the systems for MB1. So just look, it's so much less than the cost of the tunneling. And likewise, the stations. It's not. I mean, now it's not a perfect comparison. 41 to 23 versus finishes, because note that the finishes here are bundled with the civil. It's different from New York, but you can. But there are more detailed comparisons elsewhere in this report. The do breakdown. So, for example, here you can literally just change colors because everything here is sufficiently itemized that we can look at things like finishes and just reassign them to be with the mechanical and electrical as opposed to with the civils. That's not that big of a change. And you do it for these stations, and what do you get? You get that in Italy, the cost of the breakdown in cost between heavy civils and between civils and systems is, instead of 53-47, it's more like 3-1 almost. So so we benchmarked with this. We benchmarked to Paris, to the M1 extension. We benchmarked to I don't want to say we benchmarked to Stockholm, because in Stockholm we don't have perfect data. We have things that turn out to pass a sanity check of it's like Italy and France, but it's not as clear for reasons that are essentially, I've never seen a contract that's just finishes. It's either a contract for one station civils, or a contract for one station civils plus finishes, or a contract for a bunch of different finishes. So because of that, that turns out to be that's going to be 1.35x on the entire project, and about 2.3x on just systems. Labor is the same thing. You can look at it through just shares. Labor is about 50% of hard costs in New York. It should be about 25%. If labor costs go from 25 to 50%, you're tripling labor costs. And overall, you are increasing project costs by a factor of 1.5. Procurement, it's just a bunch of bullshit with just the agency constantly micromanaging everyone. It's either red tape regulations, by America as part of it, for watchers who come from the neoliberal community. Much more of this is stuff like just the agency keeps telling the contractors to change things up. And there's a lot of privatization of risk also. So on top of all of that, the contractors also have to bid higher just to make sure they're not going to lose money. If there isn't enough competition, and often there isn't. Second Avenue Subway managed to maintain some competition because it was because a lot of these contracts were in the depth of the Great Recession. So this is when these contracts were let. So you can see numbers, you can see the dates. It's stuff like, okay, so '07 maybe not, and this was too bad, but stuff like 2009, 2012, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2010, like it's, all of these were really weak years, really years of a really weak economy, and the costs did run over. All these costs ran over, but one of the things that limited the cost overrun on this was that because it was the depth of the recession, they had more competition, and then stuff that was let at more normal times, yeah, they got one bid contracts. So that just increases the profit rate, and this is another issue of procurement. If you're wondering, by the way, why it's 1.85, its procurement bullshit doubles the cost roughly, and then normally it should only raise costs by 8% for profit. And then finally, the soft costs. 1.21 is, there are essentially two ways to do that. There's the way we did it here, which is just this contract, or rather these pair of contracts, which got to the point that somehow per kilometer it cost more to just do the consultant and design, the consultant worker in the design for Second Avenue subway per kilometer. It cost more than that than to build Nya Tunnelbanan, than it's costing to build Nya Tunnelbanan by a large margin. It's about by 50% more expensive. So it's kind of ridiculous. It's just the costs of the third-party consultant and design construction management are 50% higher almost per kilometer than the cost of full construction in Sweden and Italy, but that's how it is. And so this is also, independently of just being objectively expensive, it's also expensive relative to all of this. And then you have other things that are not part of these contracts, where it turns out to be, either way you do it, it's about a 20% cost increase. So all of these combined, you just, it's things that attach to each other, because labor, for example, the issue is that you have a lot of overstaffing in New York, blue and white collar, and the upshot is that if there's a lot of overstaffing, it's overstaffing building something that's already overbuilt and bespoke, so it's stacked up until here, and then you have the micromanagement problem on top of here. So this is how a bunch of things, each of which contributes, 20% or something. Okay, maybe the oversight station contribute more, but labor, for example, is a little bit of blue-collar overstaffing, then a broken overtime system, then a bunch of white-collar overstaffing, then utilities requiring their own supervisors to be in the tunnels. All of that adds up. And again, procurement is also a bunch of things. And so everything, that's just 10 or 20%, but there's a lot of these 20%, and all of these things multiply, and this is how you're getting to an order of magnitude. That's essentially where it comes from. Look at the animation a couple more times when you can. Okay. This is not Alon reads Twitter. You can read Twitter yourself, or better yet, move to Fedi. Highly recommended if you prefer a social network that lacks Nazis and casual transphobia. And as I said, I'm going to structure it as a Q&A, and I'm going to start with the questions that people already posted, and because I didn't accidentally purposely X Mastodon because the noise was bothering me. So Connor Crowley. I do have the capability of. Okay, now let's move my head back here. So this is a lot of questions. So and bear in mind my answers to all of them are I don't know. So my answer to this question is I don't know. I will say that there that they do coordinate the various agencies better. Um, so you're never going to get to a regulator saying, "Well, I need more people. You pay for them." It's kind of surplus extraction. It's not just in construction in New York. You can see it elsewhere. Here's an example. The for cross-border trains between the U.S. and Canada, Customs and Border Patrol, CBP. Let me check what they call it. Customs and Border Protection, not Patrol. CBP essentially requires Amtrak to pay for all of the costs of having all of the CBP agents staff booths at the train station where there's pre-clearance. It's just pure surplus extraction. Or sometimes there's not even surplus. They essentially tell this agency, okay, you get money from someone else. Okay. Should everything be cut and cover? Well, so I will say that cut and cover does create a lot of disruption, and as a result, I do think it's underrated. I especially think that developing countries should, if they have wide streets, they should never pour. The main exception I can think of is maybe a place that's in a floodplain. Like I think, like I imagine that Lagos can't really cut and cover. So they should be doing L's and then some small sections of bored tunnel in Lagos Island and across the lagoon. But most places are not Lagos. And so whenever you have a wide enough street, you should cut and cover. And stations, however, should basically never be mined. The only reason to mine a station is if it's like level -3 or something and you already have a bunch of older stations in between, then you eat the premium of that. Second Avenue Subway did not need to do that. I mean, if New York ever builds a regional rail system that's not just Gateway or Gateway plus Alt-G and does something to Lower Manhattan, then it will need that, but for the most part, no. Yeah, okay, so the compliance stuff is really bad. This is essentially the MTA factor, where the MTA, and again, other American agencies do the same. It's not unique to New York. It's an American agency problem. This comes from the fact that, they just have these bullshit regulations. They don't think about compliance costs, or they think and don't care, or they think and care and think it's a good thing. They're making the contractors spend more time on proving that they don't engage in any breaking of in proving that they respect American sanctions on Iran, which is bullshit because it's like there are sanctions, like there are federal laws about this, and the same as the BDS. Like it's something like prove you are not engaging in BDS. Like what exactly? So they're not saying. So oddly, I can almost believe that there's an anti-BDS thing that would work in New York, and this is requiring companies, or at least saying that companies would be rewarded if they've received work in Israel. It's not actually good, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's actually bad to say that New York will only hire people who have worked in Israel, who have actually worked in Israel. And the reason is Israel is a small country, and sometimes you just don't bid because it's one contract there, and your plate is full with other contracts. But if you just start adding a bunch of countries that do okay on this, Israel doesn't do great on this, but does okay. Then yeah, maybe, but that's not what they're doing. It's like it's certified to us that you do not engage in BDS. It's just gonna total bullshit. And yeah, it's part of the MTA premium. There are many other premiums like this. It's just random regulations by people who are just very petty. Okay, so I'm going to skip this question about utilities because Ben Ross said something similar and I want to address both of them at once. And yeah, okay, so civil servant. This is really important. We do mention this in the synthesis report. It is, so we talk about how there's a lot of political micromanagement. Now, the yes-no decision is always political. Everything else, I won't say it's best if the governor doesn't know, it's not. It's best if the governor is curious enough to know, but then doesn't interfere. The problem is, these are entirely a coterie of political hacks. This includes the governor, but it also includes the all the political advisors and the political appointees. These are not curious people. These are people who, so there's kind of thing where I thought, no, I will answer in one sec, okay? So I want to talk for a sec about political appointees because this does get to Connor's question of the fact that in the United States they have essentially leashed the state. They've leashed the civil servants. Politicians run against their own governments. They even run against their own party governance. This is where you're getting American politicians who run against their own consultants, saying something like, the consultants don't get what real Americans think, and they told me to do X, but I'm doing Y. Like, who the hell cares? You, the politician who says that, use consultants, use the exact same consultants as everyone else in the party. Stop bullshitting. And the problem is, there's kind of delegitimization of the instruments of governance. And again, this includes party governance. One of the things that I didn't get until very recently is I thought that the political appointees were people who were pretty wonky on an issue and were specialized to that issue and happened to be loyal party members. Like, imagine Matt Iglesias is chief of staff to Secretary Pete Buttigieg. That would be, I thought it was something like that, or I don't know, or Lyman Stone as, I think he's younger, so he might not be chief of staff, like deputy chief of staff to a Republican administration on, he used to work in agriculture, in like the Department of Agriculture, but something related to family policy. But that's not how it actually works. It's generic hacks who don't really understand the issue and don't really care about the issue and will move on to something completely different. It's not someone who's deeply in that issue and is also a loyal party member. And so there's this constant leashing of the civil servants, telling them that essentially they need to lower their gaze when a political appointee walks into the room. And the result is that everything has to be done on these objective metrics because you're never allowed to give a person who's not a political appointee any kind of discretion. And yeah, the results are exactly as poor as you'd expect. I mean, there's that, and there's the flip side from politics, which is permanent staff. And I say permanent staff. Bear in mind, nobody in the United States is truly permanent. You can always fire people. They don't because they wouldn't even know who to fire. Again, these are not people who understand the subject very well, so they can't actually tell who the competent permanent staff are and who aren't. The permanent staff know this, so they lower the head. If you lower your head and answer questions laconically, they will not be able to tell, and they will only be able to get you if it's a mass firing. They will not be able to mass fire because mass firing is taking responsibility, and these people don't take responsibility. This is a giant problem, probably the biggest one at the most abstract level. Okay, so this is just something specific about the fire alarm system. Okay. Yeah, so this is related to this issue. The state is absolutist. The state is absolute, and essentially all rights you have against the state are fiction. This is something a lot of people don't get, but essentially most of the things that are said to be impossible, it's not impossible, the state just doesn't want to do it. and that was true, for example, for doing a second lockdown for Corona in late 2020 or vaccine mandates in 2021. People came up with reasons why it's illegal or something, but it's never illegal. I mean, the state, again, can fundamentally do what it wants. It's just the state didn't want, and they didn't want to say, well, we don't want to. Again, it's saying we don't want involves taking responsibility. These people don't take responsibility. Yeah, so this is also true of the delays. So something more about delays. Delays increase costs because work has to be done workers have to get paid during delays. I mean, if you try to do infrastructure construction labor as a day labor basis, you would just never get workers. It's too specialized. So if the TPM is stuck, the workers have to get paid. If there are delays because of some red tape, the workers and the supervisors all have to be paid. So this is really important. Just work faster. There's this belief that if you work fast then the result will not be good. It's the exact opposite. If you work too slow, the result will not be good. Okay, so I don't actually know what the smallest unit is. Oh, and finally, we'll say that I did promise to talk about Singapore. Singapore is one of the worst construction costs in the world. A lot of people don't get this because the sort of people who think about efficiency have derped themselves into believing that Singapore is definitionally great. This is Singapore, number 5 in the world. And again, this is not adjusting for tunnel length. All of the stuff that Singapore has been built in the last 20 something years has been fully underground. So it looks more expensive on average in the United States. It's not the US's worst, but look at Singapore. Singapore is north of 700. Like, Singapore is one of those places that are seriously contending for second worst costs in the world after New York. I don't think it wins a competition. So it's Singapore, Hong Kong, which is more expensive and it's not even fully underground. UK, that's because of Crossrail, which is regional rail. Singapore is worse than London, which is something that a lot of people who just buy all the bullshit that Singapore says about how efficient it is don't get. I've had this conversation with a consultant who literally did not believe that it could be the case that Singapore was as expensive as London. It must be much cheaper because are we sure we're comparing the right things? Yeah, we are. It's just that the sort of Western expats who Singapore rolls the red carpet for come to believe that Singapore is generally a very well run place and doesn't have this kind of conflict. Well, yeah, they're just overbuilding like crazy. As I understand it, the oversized station problem is present in Singapore as well. It's not purely New York. So yeah, this is what happened. And this is Doha, by the way. Doha is also supremely expensive. I've seen how their L's look. Yeah, they're overbuilt. They're very overbuilt. And finally, I did promise I would talk about utilities. I'm going to this will be Ben Ross Transit, I think. So he also, I should be following him. So he talks about the report and he mentions the utility relocation. I did nitpick that it's mostly about fear itself. So utility relocation was not that big of a deal. I mean, I saw the exact cost breakdown for it. It was I don't want to say small, but it was second order. And yeah, it was just not as big a deal as people think. I mean, it's a little bit of extra, but mostly it's people deciding to mine because of the fear of higher costs. I will say that for smaller projects like elevator installation in New York, it is much bigger. It's a little bit like the issue of Betterments, where where tree planting and streetscaping are a significant cost of BRT projects, but not subway projects because it's a fixed cost, and BRT is just cheaper than subways per kilometer by an order of magnitude or three. So this I think is really important to highlight, that utility conflict is a real problem. It's stuff like these extra supervisors, it's stuff like just the horrific levels of secrecy in which agencies refuse to divulge this kind of information, refuse to even organize it in a way that it could be divulged later, so they can say, well, we don't have it. Of course you don't have it, you're making an affirmative effort not to have it. And again, the civil servants learn to lower their heads and say and say can't about everything because the political appointees are a bunch of morons. And so the political appointees can't get information out of them. People don't generally want to be legible to a hostile state, and the political appointees are hostile people. They should not exist. This is the constant threat. The political appointees, just remove them and get people like and get people who actually know what they're doing, like Byford and people like that. Okay. Now, Noah, I promised I would have got to you soon, and it was over 10. It was 10 minutes ago. What aspects of the report do I worry will be overlooked? The non-U.S. cases. People in the U.S. look, I think, a lot about the stuff. They look a lot at the stuff that seems relevant to them. So they look at things like the cost breakdowns. But then they don't. But I worry a lot of people. And I know some exceptions, but a lot of people just don't think it's important to read the Swedish case or the Turkish case or the Italian case and see how competent people work. It's so much easier to study to study your own incompetence than to study a different competent institution's values, because it's much easier to study yourself than to study the other. And you do need to study the other. You do need to, read the report in English, but respect that a lot of the information is not something that you can just call your friends, or it's not something that is going to be very anchored in your own experience because it is foreign. This is a challenge for a lot of people, and there isn't enough cultural cringe in the United States to get Americans to intuitively do it. I had a meeting with with an American who's working in this field, and I'm being very vague about who this American is. They're not in an agency, I will say. So someone doing it in this external work and about it wasn't even about capital, it was about operations, and they mentioned speaking Spanish. This is a non-Hispanic white American, but they mentioned speaking Spanish, and I mentioned to them, oh yeah, cool, Spanish is a really useful language because of Spanish construction costs. I don't think it's something that even Hispanophone Americans, of whom there are quite a lot, lots of Hispanic Americans, lots of non-Hispanic Americans who, because of the large Hispanic population, is elected to learn Spanish elected to choose. You don't elect to choose. Elected Spanish as their second language to learn in high school or something. And by the way, Eric is a Hispanophone. Eric did field work in Colombia for his thesis about informal transit. So there's just no belief that, if the Spanish language is really useful, let's go read engineering reports in Spanish. Let's go talk to Spanish-speaking engineers. So a lot of this, it's not exactly in curiosity. It is in curiosity, but a lot of it is the just belief that we're America, we're better than everyone. Why do we need to read reports in other languages? Why do we need to or trust people who have foreign knowledge? It's a bigger problem because, again, our reports are in English. Information about Sweden is practically always available in English because Swedes understand that nobody speaks their language except to some extent the Danes and the Norwegians, and your report's in English. But it is kind of a leap of faith. It is outside the typical American experience to read about Sweden, by which I mean the actual Sweden, not the fictional country that Bernie Sanders sometimes talks about, the welfare state nirvana. I mean, don't get me wrong, Sweden has a welfare state, but and in fact a very developmental and efficient one. Something that Ben actually mentions here, that in Sweden in the 1970s they did a lot of efficiency measures in order to essentially get more money to for welfare, and but that's so different from the kind of popular belief of Sweden as a place with no social problems or something, or no production, only welfare. That's just bullshit. So yeah, I hope I am answering your question, Noah. If I'm not, you can ask follow-ups, and that's okay. And yeah, so that's the so no, if you have if you're so anyway, my answer to your question is I worry that people will just not read the non-U.S. reports. Just they will only read the stuff that seems directly relevant to the U.S., even though learning what Sweden's doing is incredibly relevant to everyone else. Anyway, did I answer your question? Meanwhile, I'm gonna go on the version of Fedi that is not federated with anyone else and has turfs. Because I do want to address some things that people have said. Ooh, sure, you're welcome. Okay. Twitter's being pretty jank now, recently. Sort of stuff that if Mastodon did that, everyone would say, well, yeah, Mastodon is not technically ready, you should go back to a big business. And then when Mastodon is actually pretty reliable at this point and Twitter is this jank, people are just used to it. But yeah, so the other thing that I want to highlight is while we're waiting for this to load, which is going to take a while. Okay, as I said, I'm not checking messages on stream. I am checking notifications because this is the public. Okay, let's see if Elad is asking questions or is just reporting that this happened, because you're allowed to ask questions in any language that I understand. I want to say it includes Conlags, but I don't actually speak any mainstream Conlag. Like, I don't know any Esperanto, I don't know any Klingon, I don't know any Lojban. I don't know any Quenya or Sindarin. So, okay. So I do want to highlight a brief, I don't want to call it a flame war, but maybe flame war that happened in my mentions while I was happily sleeping. Where this is something that George is saying that that he worries, and I get why he worries, that people will just say, oh yeah, we can just slash the budget, and that sometimes is the case, but but not always, especially in New York. This is for a bunch of reasons. First is New York has consensus that more subway is good. We see that because the MTA constantly publishes these wish lists of things they wish they could do. And the other thing is also system-wide projects. So we're talking about tunneling, but we have sanity checked ourselves with ADA, so with elevator access for accessibility for disabled people. I mean, there are a bunch of forms of of access for disabled people, but the one that involves noticeable capital budgets is elevator access, where it's stuff like tactile pavements that unfortunately is not universally present in New York. Don't get me wrong, it's still terrible, but installing tactile pavement is by the standards of a capital plan free, and getting and speaking to a few and either speaking to a few disabled people or reading the ethnographic literature on this to know how to have a system that's accessible to people with chronic pain, which is probably the most significant, not the most significant, the worst, but probably the most common form of disability, I should say, just because it's a huge thing. It's invisible, so people don't dwell on it as much, but it also means people ignore it, and they shouldn't. So stuff like enough placement of chairs or getting the vibrations on the buses under control, things like that. That does not cost a lot of money. Ethnographers, I mean, ethnography takes time, but you do it once and then that's your national standard, or international standard even. And also, ethnographers, have you seen how much academic humanists earn? And I don't mean a tenured professor at Harvard. I mean literally anyone else in ethnography. It's not actually that expensive. The real expense for accessibility is the elevators. And the thing is, this is something where absolute costs matter. So there's an example where people say, oh, costs don't matter because if you make the project cheaper, people will spend less money on it. No. To the contrary, with elevator access specifically, the deadlines are based on what is perceived as a normal spend rate. Now, this is relative to other capital plans, but if New York were capable of making a station accessible for $10 million, which is about what it should be based on a list of European comparisons, not all especially cheap. Berlin, for example, or rather, in Berlin, I'm doing it per elevator because Berlin has no fare gates and island platforms, so you just need one elevator to make a station accessible. Normally, you need three, one to a mezzanine, one past the fare barriers from the mezzanine to each of two platforms. So you do Berlin times 3 or something like that, or you do Madrid, or you do, not Paris, but Paris is specifically sandbagging it, you do Milan, Barcelona, whatever. It's going to be, in today's money, $10-ish million. Now, New York has already made, I think, a quarter of the system or so accessible, and it's usually it's mostly the harder quarter, so the transfer stations, so more elevators. So the remainder of the work is, I think, $4-5 maybe $billion. I mean, if they were capable of doing it, it wouldn't matter what the rest of the capital plan were. The judges who enforce this as a matter of civil rights would be able to say, oh yeah, $4 billion, $5 billion, yeah, do it in 10 years. Instead, it is a large multiple of that. I think it's something like, I think they said something like 20 billion or 25 billion. So the judge says, oh, until the 2050s, and even then, it's there are a few stations that are too difficult; they can be grandfathered. So this is something where it absolutely matters what the absolute costs are, because this is a project that can be completed. You can go 100% accessible on an old system. Berlin was supposed to get there last year, and now they're talking about, I think, in a year or in 2 years or something. So it's something that you can actually do, and would be done. And it's the same with things like improvements in signals, automation, which New York is not pursuing because they're worried about making thousands of workers redundant, as if many of them are not already redundant. The conductors, for example. and things like platform edge doors, so that people don't fall on the tracks or don't jump on the tracks or don't get pushed on the tracks. Again, things that would actually be doable, that there is a lot of popular demand for, and the absolute costs do matter. Anyway, what Elad is saying is, okay, he is linking to Reese's video on this one. And he is mentioning things, and he is specifically highlighting the role of consultants, which Doctor Strange here is mentioning happens also in Israel. There's over-reliance on consultants, not enough in-house work, which is kind of interesting because for example, military stuff Israel does do in-house. The Israeli main battle tank, the Merkava, because it's done in-house, it's probably about half as expensive as comparable NATO tanks. And this is not because it's a cheap tank. It's not because it's like a lower quality mass-produced tank. It's not the T-72. It's like a NATO standard tank that's just not being outsourced to a monopolistic but private defense contractor. So, but the civilian stuff in Israel is outsourced to consultants, and as I said, Israel does things okay. Israel is not a low-cost country. Israel is a medium-cost country for construction. And it does have problems with, for example, the electrification project being delayed due to a losing contractor suing the state for giving it to the winning contractor, and then hiring a spyware firm to say that the bid was suspicious or something. The technical scoring was suspicious or something like that. So there's something that does happen there. As I said, Israel is not Spain. Israel is not Switzerland. Israel is not Finland. Israel is not South Korea. But Israel is not the US or UK. There are a lot of things that Israel does get right. But he is highlighting the things that are a risk to Israel as well. Is that little Hebrew thing? So yeah. So to answer that question, I wanted to talk about one more thing that people are saying here. Thank you, Shaul. And when your report comes out, which will be very soon, I will do the same to you because it's a very good report what you're working on. So in case people don't know, Shaul is working on a thorough running FAQ, which will be released very soon. Right, most of it was not actually in my mentions, so it was, it's, I want to say in Eric's thread, people were mentioning things, and community garden. Oh. For the record, Eric does not in fact live in a community garden. Oh, 18 quote tweets. I saw 15 last time I looked. Yeah, I like that On Sykes is talking about climate and energy, just because transport emissions are dominant and getting more so as the electric power generation issue is resolving itself due to some hilariously low costs for solar power installation nowadays. And onshore wind, if you can get that. And if you're not Bavaria, the issue with Bavaria is not that it's expensive, it's NIMBY, so they don't allow any wind there for the most part. Okay. This is something I wanted to highlight just because of the connection with Sydney doing exactly. So all I knew about Sydney is that the construction costs in Australia are high and rising. And yeah, apparently they're doing the exact same problems. The exact same set of problems as the US and Canada on this. So, yeah, checks out. Um, um, I, okay, so there's issue of bureaucracy being parasitic. I mean, we have bureaucracy in Germany, there's bureaucracy in Sweden, there's bureaucracy in Italy. So the issue is not that there's bureaucracy, it's what kind of bureaucracy. I think it's really important. And again, you need to empower civil service experts. You need to hire engineers, pay them competitively, and not constantly tell them what to do. Which is something that is especially hard for politicians who think that they need to delegitimize their own instruments of government. But I mean, you can keep doing what you're doing, and then you will not have infrastructure. I mean, like at some point, the U.S. needs to realize it's just doing things the wrong way and needs to stop doing them the American way. Anything here that I need to look at? I don't think so. Let's get out of the thing. Oh, the car. Tomata linea P or muteli. Okay, I don't actually know this. I don't actually know this language. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know Tokipona. I mean, I'm aware that it exists, but I don't. As I said, I don't. Yeah. Mega project. Oh, really good question, Nicole. Mega projects are relative. Um, the sort of extension program. No, I also don't know. I didn't even know that anyone made a Relian language. I thought it was just a few fragments of things that H.P. Lovecraft wrote that nobody ever made into a folk online. But anyway, about SAS. Mega projects are relative. If you're New York, a 3-stop extension, 63rd being largely pre-existing, is a mega project. If you're Paris, I mean, Elizabeth Bourne may have heard of it because she used to run RATP as a political appointee and is now the prime minister, but it's not guaranteed that you will hear about it, and she will certainly not have any input about the 3-stop extension. Whereas in Paris, what is a mega project is Grand Paris Express. And this is, so mega projects are always relative to city size, city transport system. A big transport system, I mean, putting aside construction costs for a sec, in LA is more auto-oriented, so smaller subway system, so extensions there are more likely are mega at sizes that in London or Paris would not be. And then of course, relative to construction costs, I mean, if you're Paris, you spend 2 billion euros and you get I don't want maybe not 10 kilometers at this point, maybe 8 at this point, but yeah, you can get that, and that's not really a mega project, because Paris spends much more than this. In New York, you spend $2 billion. First of all, Second Avenue subway is not 2; it was 4.5, and in today's money it's 6. So second, you get so much less. So Second Avenue subway, because of the cost, relative to what is done in the city, that is a mega project. And this is generally a problem when you downscope projects in order to save money. So the United States historically built subways in the 60s and 70s. So the Washington Metro, the book about its history is called The Great Society Subway, but really there are 3 Great Society subways, which are the Washington Metro, BART, and MARTA. And LA almost built one, but I think it failed a referendum in the 60s. So these were a lot more expensive than expected. There were noticeable increases in cost in the 1970s already, and this was one of the factors behind the light rail revolution, where people realized, wait, we don't need to tunnel, we can just do light rail. This was, so the light rail revolution, the first generation of it was rather inexpensive. But then these turned into mega projects just because, oh, this is a big thing. This is what we're gonna do for all of our environmental goals, as Portland or Seattle or wherever. And so suddenly, the costs of light rail rose to essentially match those of the cheaper subways. And the same thing then happened a second time with the downgrade from light rail to BRT. Again, BRT can be cheap if it's just something that politicians don't know exists, and if the transit agency is empowered to elbow its way into getting dedicated bus lanes and things like that. But as soon as it counts as a big thing, as soon as it's conceptualized as a big thing, first of all, the highway department in America would be the Department of Transportation, the DOT, is going to extract value. For example, in Tampa, they wanted to improve bus frequency and they sold it as BRT, and so the DOT said you can't do that. Buses cause more road wear than cars. We will require you to pay for concrete lanes on your own dime, and this is not even dedicated lanes. This is just higher bus frequency and nicer bus stations, like bus shelter. So as soon as you make it look big, the extraction happens. But again, some of it is just external. Just construction costs are really high. Then even without conscious extraction, it's going to be a mega project, and then on top of that, you're going to get the extraction. So it's not exactly just a matter of redefinition, but the redefinition matters. It does matter. Does it answer your question, the card? Awesome, yeah. Do people have more questions? I am absolutely happy making this a shorter stream if people are still reading the report or if they're asking questions on written social media. Or if people bombard, I can keep going. It's fine. I can do either way. Okay. See if people in Fedi are having more questions. No. So anyway, if people have questions, I'm just gonna scroll down and talk about the recommendations a little bit. So as I said, you need to stop doing what. There's a book about it called The Leviathan by Proxy about how there isn't small government. There's just a leashed civil service where the Leviathan state is instead stuff like NGOs and political appointees. Don't do that. Just bring back the bureaucrats, please. So anyway, what we're recommending, and I genuinely believe that if all these recommendations are followed, and I just mean, and not followed as just as oh, let's get these people off our backs, as in like, ooh, let's do this and follow up and try to be curious and see and do little tweaks and actually do what they do in Sweden and Italy and Turkey and Spain and the better parts of France and Germany and so on. Then, first of all, just learn from others. You need to import experts. You need to make sure that whoever champions the project macro and does not micromanage. Just because, as you saw briefly when I was going on YouTube, let me just say that you do need a lot of innovation here. And when I say innovation, I don't mean innovation. I mean innovation like this. Again, macro manage, don't micromanage. Have I had any criticism of the report? I mean, the report's only been out. The report's been out for 23 hours, so I haven't seen big criticism. I have seen criticisms of the concept that costs matter. These criticisms are worth approximately nothing. but I haven't seen criticism of the report, or as opposed, I showed you the thing that George F. Stern was saying on Twitter, but that was a corner case. I wouldn't call it a criticism of the report, I would say a criticism of one specific thing there. Big critiques of the report, again, I haven't seen any yet. Maybe we will see some in the near future. So I can't tell you if they're valuable because I haven't seen much critique either way yet. Anyway, so what are the recommendations? Again, you need to learn from others. You need to macro and not micromanage. Again, innovation, Serral. Yeah, so we're talking about utilities. This is really important. In general, you need better interagency coordination. So this is something that the champion that we mentioned could do, just because a lot of it is just agencies that are used to saying no to everything until you make them. And then they say we can't until the political appointee is willing to take responsibility. So generally, there should not be a political appointee. The professional manager should be empowered to take responsibility. But sometimes if the relationship between the agencies just doesn't work, then what they do in Italy, they appoint something called a commissar, but it's something that exists in American culture too. It's just not called a commissar, but a czar. But that's not supposed to be the normal thing. It's supposed to be only in the case where things just break down completely. And then just means telling the agency, telling the power company to publish where all of its power lines are, and the water company, same thing, all the power lines, the water lines, and not demand that their own supervisors be in the tunnels, things like that. This also relates to transparency, just because all of these people are extremely mum with any kind of information. It's not even for any specific purpose other than just being mum with information. They're secretive. They put information that is never adverse to the agency. It can be not terribly interesting. It can be interesting and portray the agency in a positive light. It can be interesting and just useful. They put all of this behind NDAs and behind behind trade secrets for no reason. They just enjoy this, and this is something that has been defended. So you're asking before about parts that are overlooked. I'm less worried about people overlooking things and more worried about the fact that Jamie Torres Springer, who read a draft of this report, still told Streets Blog that it's important to be secretive about the let me see if I can find the construction costs Torres Springer. Here he just told them that it's important that the secrecy helps it avoid being undercut at the bargaining table. This is the knowledge of someone who has never seen a well-run infrastructure project and could not tell one. The people who actually have managed to reduce construction costs think the exact opposite. If a player with 500 ELO points in chess tells you about their opening, don't play that opening. I mean, maybe that happens to be a good opening, but you would not take their word on anything relating to anything in chess. Their ELO is 500. Yeah. And again, permanent hiring, make the state more visible. There's this idea that if you do quiet policy or quiet state, it's somehow easier. No, it's not. Like, it doesn't increase legitimacy. Quite to the contrary, it makes people feel like they're being lied to because they are. It certainly doesn't give any kind of good government. Just hire in-house, and again, hire competitively and hire people who you want to run to run your things. And so we have some special section about procurement just because it's that important. So essentially, don't do the globalized system. Instead, again, have in-house hiring, so the in-house hiring can for example, manage the risk themselves and not privatize it, so that they can know what the correct items for the itemized costs are, so that they can review the so they can review change orders quickly rather than do bullshit delays, so that they can review technical scores. Here, it's not here, here, this is something different. Here is the technical scoring, this is really important. Make sure that the regulations are familiar with the contractors. Remember, especially if you're in New York, you don't know how to build cost effectively, and international contractors do. Don't ever privatize decisions to them, don't ever privatize risk to them, but make sure that you are legible to them. Which means the regulations need to be what they're familiar with from Denmark, Turkey, Sweden, Singapore, Italy, the UK, and so on. I know that I'm mentioning both low and high cost countries. This is on purpose. Singapore has a lot of problems. It is legible to the rest of the world. And also there's a contingency issue. Sometimes they just, there's a problem with contingencies. When you have high contingencies, you're essentially saying, we are okay with cost overruns up until that limit, do not worry. And yeah, people get lazy with things when people get lazy with things like this when they know that it's okay. So the contingencies kind of create their own cost. Not overrun. Usually contingencies reduce cost overruns and increase absolute costs, but they create their own costs. So please don't do that. And we actually have a citation to this. I don't remember if the citation is in the main doc. It is this paper. So yeah, cost overruns, I mean, they exist, yeah, but for American light rail lines, they're a thing of the past for the most part. And then this is just about how to do design. I've talked about how to do good cut and cover stations and so on. Okay, oh no. What does the future of Anglophone systems look like? Do I know of any agencies? Do I know of agencies? No, I do not. Again, Sound Transit is talking to Eric about this. The LAMTA has been talking to us a little bit. I don't know what they're going to implement. I don't talk to them enough to know. Eric might know more, I'm not sure. But not at the level of agency, but at a higher level. I think the United Kingdom is in many ways ready to move beyond the globalized system. The United Kingdom was kind of the country that invented it in conjunction with Singapore and Hong Kong in the 90s. And so in Canada, they think it's more modern to do it this way because they see the US and UK do it. And in Australia, they think it's more modern. In New Zealand, they think it's more modern because they see the UK do it. The UK does not cringe. The US, not the US, the US also does not cringe. But the UK has no cultural cringe. And at this point, I think they understand that, for example, high speed 2, they all have excuses for this, but at some level they understand that high speed 2 costs about the same as all high speed lines that have been built to date in France and Germany combined. They are aware, they do some benchmarking, they're not total excuse mongers, and often what happens is the first place where a failed system was implemented often will be the first place that knows how to move beyond it. As a place that's most ready to move beyond it. And so I do think that in the United Kingdom they might be interested in doing better. I don't know if they will. I have talked to some people in London. And I have heard a lot of excuse mongering, but I've also heard more willingness to be open. So I'm not going to say I'm optimistic about London, but I'm maybe more optimistic about London than I am about New York. If that makes sense to you. New York, of course, culturally cringes the word no one, but New York has an even more extreme case of we're the center of the world than London and Paris. And to be very clear, London and Paris have an extreme case of that syndrome as well. In Paris, as I said at the beginning of this video, they do have bespoke rolling stock on the area, leading to much higher rolling stock acquisition costs than comparable systems in, for example, Germany, or Spain or Sweden or whatever. So, so this is at least for construction. The future of Anglophone transit systems, I mean, we'll see how much return to the office there is. If there isn't, then cool. Are there other questions? You know, I can't wait until it's enough summer that I tweet, not a tweet, that I don't really tweet anymore, that I Twitch, that I stream on Twitch when it's daytime and not nighttime, because there is this annoying glare, right, when you, like you see this, right, that when I look at a white screen like this, my face is backlit, and you can see how the and my face just looks different from if I'm looking at a mostly dark page like I am right now. And this is just not a thing when it's light out, but wait until April, I guess. Well, not wait until April. So, FYI, I am traveling to the United States in a couple days, and I will try to stream from the Marin offices. At least historically, I would have tried to stream normal time Berlin time. So instead of streaming 7 in the evening in New York, I would be streaming 1 in the afternoon in New York. And if that happens, then certainly they're not going to be backlighting, at least. I'm going to give people a couple more minutes for more questions, if there are any. Just because there is that little bit of lag. I mean, as I keep pointing out, the number here and the number here are not the same, so you can measure, and of course it's telescope, so you can measure, it's about, looks like a 6-second lag. And people do take some time to type, to think and then to type, of course. And if you want to type without thinking, I mean, this is why Twitter exists, or YouTube comments. I mean, not necessarily my comments. Like, I get pretty decent YouTube comments, but you go to more popular YouTubers who do things that are less niche than this, and all the stereotypes of YouTube commenters. Ooh, am I doing a meetup in New York? I imagine so. Probably more than one. I don't know the exact time. We're probably going to do another event at NYU about this. How's the high-speed rail report coming along? Well, now that this is done, I can start it. I've done a lot of early project scoping about what's needed, and unfortunately, what I was hoping to be just me writing timetables for the Northeast Corridor means it turns out to be a lot of work about New York Regional Rail specifically and Penn Station, which can be nice, but can also be horrific, if you get what I mean. I believe grant deadline on the high-speed rail report is summer 24. I mean, deadline in this report was last year, so deadlines do sometimes slip, but I'm going to make a lot of effort to have at least some relationship between when I said the high-speed rail report would be done and when it is actually done. But I mean, the thing is, it's much easier for me to tell you when it is. Yeah, delays happen, and I mean, yeah, I can literally see like project management issues that can be fixed next time, or MTA related issues, or whatever that can be fixed next time. Difference is, I get paid for per report. I don't really get paid through delays. What's the summary of the high-speed rail report and what's the goal? Ooh, okay, good question. So, no, I don't know if you're, so I know you're a first-time viewer, so I don't know if you've, sorry, first-time commenter, so I don't know if you've viewed the last couple, the last couple vlogs, here on Twitch or on YouTube. I guess if you're watching these on, for all of you guys watching on YouTube, here is YouTube for you, but this is, I'm talking on Twitch. So, next report, so the Transit Cost Project is going to shut down, right? And we're doing other things. So Eric and Elif are doing a report about IBX, which includes a lot of things that are not exactly about construction costs, but are things like land use along the corridor and how to upzone. I'm doing, so no, I have a catalog which you can find on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, which is not a very large one, but I mean, this is also not a very large stream. And its videos rather like this, but usually about other things. So the high-speed rail report is essentially a program to make cost-effective high-speed rail on the Northeast Corridor. Depending on time, it can include other things, but I don't think I'll have time beyond, writing 5 pages about why Chicago to Cleveland and Detroit is a good starter for a not northeastern system, but also don't build from that and expect to expand from that. Build from the Northeast Corridor and expand from that. And so it's things like, so have you seen Penn Design Northeast Corridor? So that was a team. So this is something that a bunch of people at Penn Design came up with a program for, and they don't necessarily. I mean, okay, this is, I guess, early action, so maybe it's not everything. Okay. Okay, we're gonna need to zoom in because apparently the way this is written is okay. So, wait, what? Why are you doing this to me? Why can you not just work? Okay, I'm gonna download the publication. I'm just trying to highlight something very specific about what they do that I'm specifically not going to do. But again, it's a proposal for how to do high-speed rail, but with ways to fit it inside of a reasonable budget. I think they are proposing something that should take $100 billion, and I'm pretty sure that I can get it in 20. I mean, I'm not saying that you should pay me 20 billion. I'm saying that grantors have already paid me many orders of magnitude less than 20 billion to come up with a program that can do it in 20 billion. And I think they've committed 30 into bipartisan infrastructural. Yeah, this. So, never mind they're talking about universities. Note the route that they're proposing. They're going via Long Island, and this is a tunnel beneath Long Island Sound. So it's a lot of things that are not necessary. So actually the idea is how to coordinate infrastructure in the Northeast between the various users, that instead of going like this, you can actually go at reasonable speed like this. And do Boston to Providence, Baltimore to Washington, Philadelphia, on basically on just existing track with maybe small deviations in truly ghastly areas, by which I mean the entire state of Connecticut. But the point is that Penn was the deck over every other. I don't remember. I don't remember what they were saying about Penn Station. I mean, I used to be deck over every other track at Penn Station as well. I mean, so. I mean, everyone comes up with these programs for Penn Station mostly because people agree that it's bad and needs to change, and then it is mostly just something that exists to spend a lot of money on architecture rather than on usability. Bear in mind, the deck over every other track plan that they had was not bad. There's also Rethink, which has something similar. One of the things, by the way, that I'm going to talk about in the high-speed rail report is, again, I'm going to have to talk about Penn Station. There's going to be an interactive 3D model there, where you can walk around and see what it would be like. I mean, you can do it now. It's just without any kind of artistic rendering. So, and with several errors in the drawings that need to be fixed. But you can, but the 3D thing exists, and I've played it. But yeah, so the idea is how to do this using best practices for integration between regional trains and intercity trains, and best practices for timetabling in general. It's going to list essentially suggestions of list suggestions for projects that they need to do for this. Some of which are on wish lists, some of which are not on wish lists. Often the ones that are on wish lists are inflated because of the, ooh, we can have more money, this is contingency, it's other people's money kind of effect, but these are often not expensive projects. I mean, $20 billion is a lot of money, but the Northeast Corridor has a lot of people. Have I ever done stuff on Ireland? No. I mean, I know that Dublin has been making these plans to build a metro for like 20 years, and I do not know what's come of them. Ooh, yeah. Again, so if there's a next stream, I mean, so I doubt I'm streaming on Saturday. So probably I'm streaming in another week. Likely at 1 in the afternoon. New York time, 7. I won't say 7 my time, but my time in a week is going to be 1, and it's going to be New York time, not Berlin time. Yes, it will be the hole in the ground. It will exactly be a hole in the ground where all of the concessions are going to be on very wide platforms. The whole point is, the whole point of hole in the ground is if you remove MSG and you remove all of the above ground structures from Penn Station, then you can much more easily modify the tracks, and then instead of trying to do kludges, like pave over specific tracks, which is almost good. Penn Station, if Penn Station had 24 tracks and not 22, then it would be perfect, but it's not. It has 22. Or rather, it has 21, but essentially it's 22 with one track missing and replaced with as if it has been built, as if it has been paved over, so that specific station is how it would be if that station is just the platform station, the platform just wider. Ooh, yeah. I'm glad that Matt Burning. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I talked to Matt Burning about this kind of infrastructure more because, I will say, I complained before about people being incurious about Sweden beyond like platitudes. I'll give Matt a lot of credit that he's not like that at all. He's actually very knowledgeable about details of Nordic welfare. I think he mostly talks about Finland, which I know about less than I know about Sweden. That might be redesigned, I'm not sure, but at least the way the plan is now is that it's just one level with like long staircases and escalators, and then there's also access to the subway at the end. But the point is not to have a mezzanine because it's supposed to be more open. Again, that might be redesigned. I mean, Berlin has mezzanines, right? The Hauptbahnhof here is a 5-level station. There's the entry level, upper mezzanine, Stadtbahn, then lower mezzanine, then the lower level platforms. So levels 0, 1 to -1, -2, if you will. And but the mezzanines are set up in a way that there are much better sight lines. It's just that I honestly don't think Penn Station needs mezzanines. And yeah, it's 12 minute, not 12 meter elevation change, but you can do 12 and a half meter elevation changes. I mean, it's not going to be one staircase with no landings. There's going to be there have to be intermediate landings. The rule is an intermediate landing every 20 steps. Yeah, I may have spent a lot of time reading stair and escalator and elevator construction standards in multiple countries. You can only do 20 steps at a time. The problem with 33rd and 31st is that they're not fully excavated. The excavation is up until about the middle of 33rd and the middle of 31st. So, northern half of the street and southern half of the street are, as I understand it, unexcavated. It would be somewhat easier if it were fully excavated. I mean, there's still a ton of space, but there's a little bit of a constraint, and I emphasize a little bit. But anyway, yeah, that's just specific to Penn Station, which I hope is not going to be most of the work. It's part of the work, but it's mostly a scheduling exercise plus talking about like issues of project delivery to get it done for a reasonable cost, and talking about integration of infrastructure and what's it called, and in operations. But anyway, that's my work for the next, I don't know, year to year and a half. Anyway, are there other questions either about this or about other things? Like, this was not intended to be a Penn Station stream. I've done Penn Station streams. Oh, Dublin is building a metro. But when you call it Metro North, is it a metro or is it like an actual subway, or is it like light rail that is being called metro? Because I know that Dublin has had these questions. Are we doing light rail? Are we doing metro? Are we doing both? Again, I'm not very familiar with Dublin. It's kind of weird because I almost moved to Dublin. Because I was looking for an EU city that spoke English, but I was already in Paris and I speak good enough French, and and it was already there for other reasons that I didn't move. Oh, right. There's already a Dublin metro, and this is an actual metro. Okay. I don't know how much it costs. I may have seen numbers. I don't think it's in our database. I should actually look at this and add to the database at some point. Oh, yeah, now I remember. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, I can look at the costs and add to the database, but I can't really tell you beyond that. I mean, I remember that the costs were high, maybe. I remember that there were some people who were complaining that this was stupid and that they should just imitate Spain. But and I know that Manuel Maismena spoke to the Irish government about this like 20 years ago, like 19 or 20 years ago. It's one of the standard citations. Like, there are essentially two things that people cite by Melis about this. One is what he said to forgetting whether it was entirely or to all of Parliament or just one committee. I think it was just one committee, or to and like a write-up that he did specific to Madrid, which is this one. This is a 5-page report or something, or 6-page report. Yeah, 5-page report. Yeah. This is by a person who casually I don't remember the budget, but we can check because it is the source for something. Why are these slow? Yeah, so So there were these programs. Can you guys see? No, you can't. So go here. So yeah, Berlin, Madrid, casually built. For a budget of, in today's money, about $10 billion, casually built 100 something kilometers of tunnel. Yeah. Anyway, this is his write about how he did it. Yeah. Oh, right. Does Ireland? I thought Ireland had. Yeah, Ireland is like entirely unelectrified, right? I mean, Ireland. I mean, Ireland should electrify most likely. I mean, I don't know what this like how salvageable the long range railways are, but if they're salvageable enough that you can expect people to ever ride the trains on the current alignment, wire them all. There's unfortunate aversion in Europe to being parts are electrified. Okay, then yeah, just extend the electrification. There's just kind of annoying aversion in Europe to full electrification, so that even the Netherlands and Belgium, I think, are stuck at 80% or something, and Sweden at 86%, which is really frustrating. The benefits of being completist are pretty high. India and China are going for complete, and I think it's also true of South Korea. And at this point, India is more electrified than nearly everywhere in Europe. China, same thing. It's just what they've done in the last 20 years. It was very much not like that 20 years ago. This is something that is kind of underrated in Europe and laughably underrated in the United States, how little electrification they do. I mean, Dublin is partly electrified. Boston, metro area, counting the satellite cities that do have commuter rail service, like Providence and Worcester, it's about 7 million people. One line is wired, they run diesel under the wire. Only the intercities are running under electricity. Yeah, some American things about this are just ridiculous, and this is one of them. And of course, you have the usual issues of excessive construction costs, excessive political meddling, agencies that don't have enough in-house staff to properly do good engineering on this. I mean, America, stay America. Oh, unrelated to the report, do I have thoughts on Vermont Transit? I don't know. So, didn't Burlington make the buses free or something? Like the Burlington had free transit, and specifically they mentioned it as something that increased ridership because there were some cases of like transitional systems. It was just where it was just very poor people and the relics of middle class white flighters who generally drove but did take the bus to their city center jobs, but they were about to stop doing so, and then free transit was the trigger that made them stop because there were more homeless people on the buses, like in Austin. And in Burlington, as I understand, it didn't happen. That's basically all I know about transit in Vermont. I can't even tell you whether Burlington is like a good bus system for its size. The frustrating thing is that Vermont is so rural and so low density, it's really hard to make trains work there. Essentially, the only way you can make, I will answer in a sec. The only way you can make, sorry, people don't see. I will answer this in a sec. So one thing that the state could do is try to push for intercity rail to New York. No, what do you mean most of the USA? Most of the USA by land? Yes. Most of the USA by population? Yeah, not really. But Vermont happens to be rural on a rural bio standards. But anyway, no. So like honestly, if I'm Bernie Sanders, then I'm just trying to commit money to high speed rail with the understanding that it might, if the border controls are not horrific, include New York to Montreal via Vermont rather than via Plattsburgh. Just because it's flatter to go via Vermont. By the way, it's not political, but this is essentially the only way I can see high quality railways work in Vermont. the distance, it's one of these really frustrating things where you don't need a lot of density to make high-speed rail work. I mean, you can make high-speed rail work with the density of like Wisconsin. What you cannot do is make low-speed rail work with low density, because the distances between cities are then too long for the range of low-speed intercity rail, which is generally shorter than that of high-speed rail. High-speed rail is competitive between about 200 and 1,000 kilometers. Low-speed rail has a much narrower range of competitiveness. People sometimes fly New York to Boston. It's not common. People usually take the train or the bus, or mostly just drive. But the sort of people who would be flying New York to Boston usually take the train, maybe the bus. That's 350 kilometers. At Boston to Philly, it's 500 people already fly. And Boston to DC is one of the busiest air corridors in the United States. In fact, it is I want to say it's like number 6 or 7 busiest in the United States, Boston to Washington. So the SL is low speed rail, but it's also horrendously expensive. But it's on the fast side of low speed rail. So for Vermont to get something that averages 100 kilometers an hour, that's really marginal. I mean, you can see it. I mean, especially if the competition is flying or driving, and it's specifically to New York. But it's something that I am a little concerned with its success, unless it's high speed rail, or unless it is like a low speed extension of high speed rail from New York to Albany. Transfers are allowed. People transfer. People especially transfer at what's called the outer end, which would be Albany. But just adding another train on the Ethan Allen Express, I can see that, but I mean, I don't think that's going to be significant. Or the Vermont or something. Okay, Spender's research. What are my thoughts on the election in Berlin this Sunday? No. Or rather, to be a little less cryptic, CDU is somehow polling first. I mean, I doubt there's going to be actual CDU in the college. It's probably going to be another Edward Green. But essentially the Greens are trying to be Die Linke without the Putinism here. I literally got a postcard from the candidate who I did vote for, saying that, not Die Linke, of course, I'm not saying the Greens, who said that the rent control was their idea. And essentially they were running against SPD. And meanwhile, SPD, they have the SPD just has pictures of the mayor to remind people that they're running with a scandalized plagiarist, I guess. No. The way all the parties here are running for a bunch of party insiders rather than for the general population is so terrible. Anyway, that's my thought on the election on this Sunday. I voted by mail. And yeah, I hope it's gonna be Greens, then SPD, then CDU. It's likely to be the exact opposite order. Fuck. There was some discussion about high-speed rail. No, it would not be viable. Ireland is not a good country for high-speed trains. And let me show you why. Or rather, Ireland is not a good country for... Actually, no, Ireland is just not a good country for high-speed trains, period. There's exactly one high-speed line that I can see ever work in that area. It would require being very good at construction costs, which neither of these countries is, unfortunately. I can see this tunnel. I can see an Irish Sea tunnel going Holyhead to Dublin. It's a long tunnel, I think twice as long as the Channel or Sakon or something like that. But I think at this point it's viable. It is not an especially deep channel. It's not an especially deep channel. It's a giant mega project. I'm guessing this is 20 billion euros to build. Maybe a little less, I don't know, maybe 15, but 10 would be very low. So 15, let's say 20 billion euros for this. Then you still need to get from Holyhead to high speed 2, should be something around here. And yeah, you can do it with only a little bit of tunneling around North Wales, but that's still something. This is not going to be 20 billion unless it's a high speed 2 closer than it is. It's going to be worse than this. London to Dublin I can sort of get as the fuck you Ryanair type investment. Domestically within Ireland, look, Dublin to Cork is 220 kilometers. That is within the range of low speed trains. You do not need high speed rail at this. At this range, the savings are not going to be significant enough to justify the cost. It's much more important at that stage to worry about first and last mile. Now, Dublin to Belfast is what? To Dundalk, which I've only heard of because the cores are from there, it's about 70 something. And then Belfast is another 70. Yeah, this is like 150-ish, Dublin to Belfast. That's also not high-speed rail distance. And even if you add all of them combined, yeah, 370 Cork to Dublin to Belfast. Yeah, that's a scale at which you can start doing high-speed rail. I mean, it's about Taiwan high-speed rail, but not. I mean, Cork and Belfast are not large cities. Dublin kind of is, but Dublin is right in the middle. And Taiwan makes the high-speed trains there work because the second cities, all three of them in Taiwan, there's Taichung, Tainan, and Kaohsiung. Not Kaohsiung, Kaohsiung. So Tainan, Kaohsiung, and then there's Taichung. As the name suggests, in the middle, maybe not in the south, like Tainan and Kaohsiung. These are all about 2.5-ish million people, and then Taipei is another 9, counting Xinbei and Taoyuan. So city size matters, and I don't think that domestic high-speed rail on the island of Ireland is viable. Again, I can see a future in which if Britain decides to stop being an asshole country, where a Holyhead to Dublin tunnel with connections to high speed 2 would work. But that's because you're at that point connecting to London. Yeah, London is big. The cities of Ireland are not. Are there other questions? Because I did think it might be an hour. It always happens. I think it's an hour 10 stream, and then it's 2 hours because people ask other questions. So anyway, for Ireland, all I can say is that I don't think it's good geography for high-speed rail. Too small. And too small also not in the way to anything. Belgium is too small. Belgium, therefore, doesn't really have high-speed rail. I mean, there's Brussels to Paris, but that's it. The other high-speed lines are so discontinuous that the average speeds are just ridiculously low, even when there is a higher top speed, like Brussels to Aachen or Brussels to the Dutch border. But Belgium is on the way between places. It's on the way between Paris and the Netherlands, or between Paris and Köln. Ireland is on the way between Britain and the United States, I guess. So yeah, I'm sorry that I don't think it's viable, but I don't. Again, this would be nice if, again, Britain decided to be less of a horse's ass about literally everything. I don't know. I know that Jarrett Walker was involved and that there was a lot of controversy about it because I can't even tell why there was controversy. So, I mean, I know that people were complaining about the transfers. I don't know enough to say whether the complaints were justified. People complain a lot. Sometimes the complaints are valid and sometimes they are not. I don't know enough to tell you whether they are in this case. Are there other questions? Ideally questions about the cost report and not about buses in Ireland, which as I said, don't know enough about to have opinions. Alright, if people don't have any questions, then thank you all for watching. And I will see you. Oh, what was the name of the playlist that I had on YouTube? I don't know. I mean, I mostly just watch either random pop or random queer or random whatever artists, or I just watch StarCraft streams. Like, if you, the thing is, like, it's also not a good guide to what music I listen to because I have a lot of music on my computer. Yeah, yeah, please do read it. As I said, it is available on the site. The entire report in one PDF with one combined bibliography. It runs up to 413 pages, I believe. It's 25 megs because there are graphics there. It's not just 413 pages of text, which is how you could tell that it was not exclusively my work, because I would absolutely inflict 400 pages of prose on people. In fact, I inflicted more than that with World War III. I mean, I guess that has graphics, but it took me months of people badgering me to do the graphics, so... oh, the past live stream. Sorry. Yeah. I have a channel on YouTube. Lon Levy channel, YouTube. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, this is why I record. Fun fact, my most popular streams were my first two when I was just crayoning things on stream, and they were not recorded because I did not know that I needed to record to, because I thought Twitch did it automatically, and apparently it doesn't. Maybe unless you're affiliate, and it was not at the time. Anyway, final call for questions. So lag 8 seconds. Sure. Come again. Usually I stream again twice a week, but I sometimes miss. Probably gonna miss the Saturday. Yeah, I hope so too. I hate flying, so it's gonna be fun. Yeah, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you again with another topic. I'm not sure which one in about a week. So thank you, and ciao ciao.